Here, are we good for recording? Awesome. Hi, guys. Pleasure to see you guys. My name is Eric Marsi. I'm a six-time Microsoft MVP. I'm the co-founder and CTO at Eighth Layer Technologies. My business partner, Mike Marshall, is here in the back corner. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Voltex Solutions. That's the AV production business that I run. So if you guys have seen the podcast booth downstairs, that is my other business. I do want to thank our 2026 Platinum sponsors. Without them, this event would not be possible. So for the agenda today, I'm going to do a brief introduction about me, kind of some background, and then we'll look into the general terminology in US E911 legislation, how Teams handles emergency services, how we import data into Microsoft Teams in a good fashion, not the bad fashion, just clicking around the GUI, how we go on to maintaining those database, followed up by a workbook demo and just a quick wrap up at the end. Everybody's there. Everybody's there. Awesome. So from Doylestown, Ohio, I'm the weird guy that drives here every year with a bunch of AV gear. And I'm also the director of technology for the National Microsoft Teams User Group. So if you guys have ever attended Teams UG, I'm one of the guys behind the scenes. Used to be content as well, but now I've kind of taken a little bit of a step back as business roles have grown. Tons of fun things I'm interested in: reverse engineering, hardware security, security research, kind of security, that general topic, just a bunch of other random things. So if you want to reach out to me, socials, ericmarsi.com, Eric Marsi on X, and Eric Marsi on LinkedIn. Very common. Other fun fact about me, I likely have a lab for that. If you tell me a scenario, I will likely go build it and validate, or, hey, here's how you fix it. So a lot of fun things that I do, things I'm not supposed to do, like virtual at Teams rooms. Again, more in the... I do not have any licensing or Intrado EGWs. So unfortunately, I do not have any. I have to have licensing for things. So the question was Intrado EGWs for the recording. All right. So hopping out of a little bit about me and hopping more into what you guys are all here for, we're going to talk about general terminology and US 911 legislation. I'm not going to sit here and list all these out for you. Some big ones: PSAP, Public Safety Access Point; ECRC, Emergency Call Relay Center. And then DID, non-DID. DIDs are real phone numbers, non-DIDs are non-routable phone numbers, and some other fun little topics. We'll explain those as we go through the presentation. So let's look into what is Next-Gen 911. So traditionally, 911 services used to not relay location information. So when you made a 911 call, it was either just a static address or something static that did not change. Next-Gen 911 uses information that's in that initial SIP invite, known as PIDFlow. You have to go back a slide to figure out what that stands for. I'm horrible at remembering all the acronyms, so I just at least tell you what it is. But the difference here is that it's sending an active geocode, so latitude, longitude, as well as sublocation information like a floor or suite number or other things in that initial SIP invite to your ESRP, so Intrado, Bandwidth, /911 Secure, and Telequint. And then they're taking that data and then determining what to do on their side. So when we look at wired 911, there was basic 911. We had where it's just static voice only, no caller ID, no or data. There's E911, which is where we had voice and caller ID, and then Next-Gen 911 is what we're at now. We will refer to Next-Gen 911 as E911, even though E911 is not what we're configuring. So it's a little bit of a fun word salad there. That was for our wired connections, and then also for our mobile 911. Basic 911 is, again, voice only, no caller ID or data. E911 is the cell phone towers triangulate your location. And then Next-Gen 911 is where your phone's sending its active GPS coordinates to that 911 operator at the time of call. So emergency response location for emergency call is historically based on the billing address of the line. So if you got an account with 100 lines, that's typically the address for 911. So if you dial 911, you're in the state of Arizona and your lines are being terminated in Ohio, it's going to show that you're in Ohio, not Arizona, if you make the call out via one of those. So this shifted to being represented with the user's location being represented dynamically based off of geocodes. So that's your latitude, longitude. So now the call taker is getting that geocode, but then they can resolve to your address when appropriate. They don't necessarily need to know your address. They just know you're here. So, traditionally, if you have a, weird address like 825 West Highway 161, Sometimes people aren't going to know exactly where that address is. Sometimes, GPS systems, you type it into your Garmin or Google Maps or wherever, it may not recognize that address always. And so by getting that geocode, we know exactly where you are at the time of that 911 call. And so again, those two systems translate, like the latitude, longitude, makes it easy. And then the civic address can exist with the same address for different buildings. So what do we mean by that? So the general rule of thumb is for every building that you guys have in your company that you own, manage, and operate, every one of those is considered a civic address. If you've got 3 buildings that all share the exact same address, you do not do one entry in Teams. You want 3 separate entries. The difference will be the geocode. So the latitude and longitude will be different for those 3 different buildings. It also means when we get further on the presentation about what do we do from a network perspective to make that work. Because it's not just, simple, drawing a line, here you go, here's these 3 buildings. So there's a lot more on the technical side there, but general rule of thumb, every building equals 1 civic address. Looking at U.S. legislation without having to read the entire, I don't even know how many hundreds of pages it is, I'm going to give you the short and simple version. Harry's Law. So this is direct 911 dialing. This is a unfortunate event where a girl died because they required dialing 9 first before dialing 911. So if you're dialing Teams on a modern telephony system, you have to be able to dial 911, no additional characters. Now, in Teams, we'll talk about in a little bit how we can handle users that are used to dialing 9911 or 112. If they're from the UK visiting the US, they dial 112, 999. Or if you're also a fan of the IT crowd, 0118-999-881999-9199-7253. I did not practice that. So again, we want to make sure that we allow for that leading 9, allow for those other codes, but we always send it out to the carrier as 911. Additionally, part of Carrier's Law is requiring a notification in the event that somebody dials 911 in your organization. Now, there is no law that says here's exactly how you have to handle the notification. You could have one notification group for your entire organization. It doesn't matter. At least one person must be notified that you're that someone has made a 911 call. That information must include valid callback number, and then the information being sent to the PSAP. So address, sublocation if applicable, geocode. Additionally, in the US, we have Raybum's Act, which defines the dispatchable location. This is where we have to identify users at a federal level per building, per floor. Floors at the federal level are classified as a maximum of 60,000 square foot. If you have floors that are larger, you have to separate those floors into smaller sublocations. So floor 1 north, floor 1 south, floor 1 east, floor 1 west, or however which way it works for your organization. We'll talk about some options that you have for that. We have a question.
Yeah. That,
yep.
Where's that line?
It's part of Raybum's Act. I will get you a link for that. So follow up with me at the end. The question was, where do we find that 60,000 square foot info? I'll put a link out when we send the recording out. We'll get the link in the YouTube description as well. Yeah. So that's we'll talk about that in a bit too. Actually, I think it's the next slide. Actually, not next slide. The slide after that. Perfect. So there is per state legislation that supersedes federal regulations. Chicago down to 10,000 square foot. There's a few cities in Florida that are down to the cubicle. So you get very granular depending on where you're at. There's another question. Mm-hmm. Okay. So for the recording, the question is, the organization, they have a local PSAP for their campus. It's education, I would assume. Okay. Do they need to notify anyone if the call goes to that PSAP since they're familiar with the campus? So is that PSAP federally registered? So what I mean by that is if I'm on my cell phone and I'm on campus and I dial 911, just not in Teams, just from my cell phone, will it go to that PSAP or will it go to another department? Because that's a differentiator. So if it is a PSAP that you guys own and operate, somebody in there will have to be notified via Teams notification or the call. That's somebody that's part of your guys' school. So that would be classified under that. But even though they're still maybe the ones receiving the calls, that depends on if they're federally registered or not. So if somebody dials 911, it goes external to another PSAP, and they're just being notified. It's a difference on that. So, okay, so they received the phone call, so they are federally registered then. Okay, so Intrado, and then goes back to them. Okay, so then, yeah, you're federally registered then at that point. They're part of the organization, so technically there's not really anything you need to do there. So if they're part of the organization, you're good. Mhm.
Oh,
Gotcha. So the scenario is that the users have their own policy assigned that has a local contact, but the global policy does not in terms of the emergency calling policy. Okay, good. Okay. Yep.
well,
Okay. I would say that is a problem, and the reason why that is a problem is that if somebody goes off campus, but they're on their laptop because the Teams phone is not locked to your campus anymore. They take the device off campus, they make a 911 call. You still have the requirement to do that notification. And so when that user's off campus, they don't have that notification happening. Might be running into some legal issues there. I'm not a legal guy, but that is a requirement. If the MLTS supports it, you have to have that configured. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Another I thought we had another question. Sorry. Another law that we have to look at is for our pre-K through 12 schools. That is effective February 6th, 2019 in New Jersey. There's no additional states yet, so it's still kind of making its way through. But Alyssa's law allows for panic buttons, more or less, in rooms. So it doesn't necessarily tie to Teams as a phone system. There's not really panic buttons on Teams phones yet. Hopefully it changes. I don't know. I've seen like Cisco phones that have like the little extra button on top that can be configured to be like a panic button. The phone looks the same, but it dials 911 in the background. That's more or less silent panic alarms. Teachers can have little remotes, and Trado has some offerings around that where they just press a button and it notifies that they are in this position in this building, and that does a silent 911 call for emergency services. As mentioned, federal law is superseded by state, county, and city law. As of June 2025, these states here have additional requirements. Florida, some of them are 7,000 square foot. Michigan is 40,000 square foot. Chicago, there's some areas that are 10,000 square foot. And Trado does have you covered. I have a tiny URL and a QR code there for your reference, and that is the most up-to-date information as for the whole thing. Quick summary. So again, the idea here is any site that you guys own, manage, operate, that is using an MLTS, a multi-line telephony system that supports Dynamic 911, must be configured to support Dynamic 911. If it doesn't support it, it must still be able to dial 911, at least with a static location. But if we're talking about Teams phone, it supports Dynamic 911. That doesn't apply to you. Sublocations can be a maximum size of 60,000 square foot. Again, that is based on the federal level. It's changes by the city, county, or state that you live in. Additionally, we have to have no leading numbers to dial 911. If it is an international organization, user must be able to dial 112-999 and have it translate properly while within the U.S. And at least one person must be notified in the event of emergency call being placed, and some few other fun things that we just recently talked about. Before I move on, questions? Awesome. How does Teams handle emergency services? So in Teams, there's dynamic configuration and static configuration. I might be wondering, why are we talking about static? Why does static even apply? Teams is not just US, it's a global platform. These laws do not apply right now outside the US. You are theirs right now. That is going to be changing. So there's Next Gen 112 and other things being planned outside the US currently. No date yet on any of that. So when you're using calling plans in Teams, if you're in the US and Canada, when you assign a phone number to a user, you must assign a civic address ID, a civic address location ID to that user. So if you're in PowerShell, you add a location ID when you're assigned the phone number. If you're in the GUI, you assign a location. It will not let you complete that without assigning that location. The E911 supporting US and Canada. Canada. Wow, I cannot talk today. Canada. Canada. A location that's dynamically acquired has priority over that static assignment. Similar with Teams policies. If you have a Teams emergency calling policy or Teams emergency call routing policy assigned to you as a user, the dynamic one via network topology takes precedence over that. So it's kind of the inverse of what we know from Skype for Business Server. If any of you guys are older UC guys. And then there are differences in specific routing for all countries. Make sure you check Microsoft Docs. So in the US, it can route automatically to the 911 PSAP if you have a valid location. And it's learned via Liz, and there's a few other conditions there. Else, it's routed to the ECRC via calling plans. Canada calls via calling plans are always routed to the ECRC. ECRC, I did not talk about that fully. That is a call center. As an example, if some calling plans route through bandwidth, I'm not fully familiar with Microsoft backend, but a lot of it's bandwidth. So there's a call center that's up in Canada that would answer the call, even if you're in the US. If a call routed through Intrado, it's I think it's Colorado or somewhere central in the US. They have their own, its own their own call center. But again, we're talking calling plans here, so it just depends on what Microsoft does in their backend. I think they have more than one carrier. I don't know if Jamie can. Yeah, I don't know. It's awesome. And then the big thing here is we talked about dynamic and static location. The static portion of this is when we assign that location ID to that user for that phone number. It's this last part right here. If the caller has no ability to speak, and the moment they make a 911 call, if they have no address information. So an example of this would be, I am off-site, or I'm in a location, maybe I didn't configure my 911 correctly. I have no location. I dialed 911 silent. There's no audio. The static location that's assigned with that civic address ID is what's used for the ECRC. And so that's where 911 service will go. Even if it's not correct, it's just an absolute last chance, best effort there. Operator Connect, it's like calling plans. Various operators treat their location assignment to numbers differently. So we talked about calling plans where you have to assign that location. Operator Connect works a little bit different. There's sometimes where the operator assigns a location ID, so they have access to your civic address IDs, and they assign that, but you have the ability to change that in text. So when you assign that number, you can change the location, great. There's also a scenario where the operator does not assign locations. So when you assign that phone number to a user, you have to set that location ID. And then there's also times where the operator will assign it and does not let you change it. So you have to change it via their portal, their backend, not via the Teams admin center. And direct routing, get a fun little list here. So Teams and direct routing will send the call to the SBC that your emergency call routing policy says to go to. So if you dial 911-933, define that emergency dial string, it's going to go based on that PSTN usage to the SBCs that you have configured it for. The SBC make and model must support E911. Audio codes, ribbon, any node, etc. There's a few lists. If you look at the plan direct routing page on Microsoft Docs, you'll see that list, and it's always up to date with the most up-to-date information. The other big thing here is that the SBC must send it to the right ESRP. So a lot of times I get into customer environments, they're like, oh yeah, we got 911. I'm like, okay, where's your connection to Intrado, bandwidth, whatever? Oh, routes to our carrier. I'm like, have you tested it? No. Who's your downstream carrier from there? Because there are some carriers. I'll use IntelliPeer as an example. They do downstream to Intrado, so those are valid scenarios. A lot of times, most people don't have it enabled or fully configured, and it just depends. You have to test this. It's not just you're not Operator Connect. You're not calling plans where somebody else is managing it. You have to validate that. We have another question.
Also.
Yep. Yep. So again, some carriers forward them. Don't if you don't have to, but again, certain contracts, if you validate it, it's perfectly fine. And then on the SBCs, we set up a backup route in the event of a carrier outage. So in the event that you have a trunk to Intrado, you've got trunk to your AT&T, Verizon, Lumen, whoever you have. We set it up so that there's a route that always says go to Intrado. If that is down alternate route and go towards your PSTN. However, let's say on AudioCodes SBC, we set up an outbound manipulation that changes the destination. So we say if there's anything that goes out via the PSTN 91933, we set to a number that Intrado, 911 Secure, that ESRP is going to provide. It's I know as a contingency number, so it's a direct path to the ECRC. Downside with that, no location data is being sent. But the benefit is you still get at least, hopefully, a 911 call in the event of a Intrado service outage or internet outage or something else. Just depends on your scenario and how you're being configured. Another question.
The question on that. So, when they always send, I think with,
Mhm.
and then so, like, I, me, I get that, good,
Correct. So that would be fine. It depends on the carrier. Just because I've been dealing with a lot of customers, 99 times out of 100, it's never the case. I will put AT&T would be one of the new ones supporting that. Again, IntelliPeer, they support it, but it's 50-50. You have to enable it per DID. It's not just enabled for your trunk. And so every carrier is different. But I will say that if you are going out and your carrier does support it, so you have direct trunks to Intrado, but also a tertiary trunk to AT&T, you don't have to do that manipulation if they allow the support of receiving PITA flow. So that's awesome. Yep. We talked about that being part of the XML data PITA flow. And then if there's no location provided, ECRC will answer. If you're not able to speak, the dynamic address that was sent, Annie Alley, is used for that. So that's your registration on the phone numbers. Similar to Teams calling plans, just not inside the Teams admin center. We talked about the emergency call routing policy. And so this is an example configuration of one that I use with a lot of my customers. We have our emergency dial string. That is the number that is dialed the moment you dial, that goes actually out to your SBC. Emergency dial mask is our list of numbers that can be used to then go out as that. So in this case, 911, 9911, 999, and 112 are all options to go out as 911. If you're an international organization, this will change. So kind of, let's just say we're in the UK and we have an emergency call routing policy and we don't have the exact, per floor other requirements. We still want to, allow dial emergency services. We could say, okay, emergency dial string is 999 now, but if somebody dials 911, they're from the US, they go to the UK, it's kind of the inverse of it. We can support that. And we also had 933, which is the test number for most 911 providers. It can change depending on your account. Yes. Yes. So the question is that now, is that with the Teams app or the native dialer? Teams app. Okay. So the question is that using a native Teams app and they dial 911, is it possible that they get their exact location and they go right to the PSAP versus ECRC? Correct. Okay. So yes, that is the answer. So any Teams native app, so Teams on your Android, Teams on iPhone, Teams on MTR, Teams on Teams phones, Teams on your desktop, Mac, client, everything else, they support that location lookup based off your list database in Teams. So it's not basing it off your cell phone's location data. That's kind of like on Windows, it's Windows Location Services, which is like an estimate of your location. Your mobile phone has an estimate of its latitude, longitude of where it's at. It doesn't look at that data. It's looking at the network data, which we'll talk about, which is the Liz database in Teams, to then say if it's going to route local to your PSAP, if it's a known location, or if it's just guessing.
Oh, so it has to.
Correct. And so if you take that cell phone, you're on campus, let's say this is our campus, and I disconnect from Wi-Fi and I make a 911 call, that's now going to go out right direct to the ECRC. If I connect back to the Wi-Fi, when I make the 911 call, it's going to go out to the PSAP directly if the location data is correct. So BSSIDs, subnets, etc. Yes.
App.
It's going to ask for permissions to your location. It's still not using that, correct? Yes. So early days of Teams, this was outlawed in the US. The Teams client would, if you dial 911, it could switch to the mobile native dialer in the phone. That was made illegal in the US. So it just across the board, everybody's like, nope, we're just going to use the dialer and treat it as two separate applications. So what's the routing logic look like? So this is kind of tying a little bit into that. Winter calls route to ECRC. So emergency address is obtained for the operating system, user unconfirmed. So inside of Teams, Windows Location Service is an example. Will try to always estimate where your location is when you're not. I mean, not even when you're on the company network, it's going to try to estimate it. Doesn't know that's on a company network. Teams will then see that address information. If they do nothing in the dial 911, you're going to the ECRC. If they confirm that location and mark it as verified, you're going direct to the PSEP for that address. If you manually enter the address without confirming it, that will go to the ECRC. And if you have a statically assigned address to the telephone number, it's going to go to the ECRC. When is it going to go to the PSAP? So this is the address being learned dynamically via the Liz lookup. The emergency address obtained for the operating system, user confirmed it through the auto suggestion. Emergency address entered through the address, auto suggest confirmed by the user, and then also statically assigned to a common area phone. So we have to look at this from other scenarios. You are a Teams user that's marked as a common area phone, and you assign a location to that common area phone. That address will be used. Okay, and that was something new that Jamie had presented last year. So shout out to Jamie. So that's also controlled by the CS Teams IP phone policy with the common area sign-in method or the meeting room sign-in method. So that's if you're using like a Polytrio C60, that's using that meeting room experience first. Inside of Teams, what does that call notification look like? So if I dial 911 or any of my numbers, so direct routing, one of those numbers we have there, or if our operator connect or calling plans, when I make a 911 call, I'm going to see this screen right here. It's going to say, you're making an emergency call. It's an emergency call in progress. Here's your number. Here's your address. Here's the location. You're on the call with 911. So again, it shows for being compliant with carrier's law, shows the fact that you place an emergency call. It shows your number. It shows your location. On the notified people side, we'll see here that in this case, we'll use the generic Microsoft test user, Alex Wilbur. Says, hey, this person placed an emergency call at this address. This is a little bit of an older screenshot. Don't want to dox myself a little bit there, but we use the Microsoft generic one. But again, anybody that's part of that notification group, if you're using the notification mode in the calling policy in Teams, they're going to see this message. Now, one cool thing that not many people know about is that is a group chat. So every 911 call is a conference call in Teams, okay? If you press that little call button in the top right, you can join into that call. Additionally, via Teams in the emergency calling policy, there's two other methods that says anybody that's part of this group, just call them, either conferenced in, muted, or unmuted. I don't see that one be used too often. Some scenarios there is, the need for that, but a lot of times I just see people happy with the notification. They can join in and listen to if they wish. Yes. No. So is this a scenario where you have failed over to the SBC? So Teams is down.
I call them.
It's a good question. That's a very good question, actually. Not know the answer to that. Let me look into that for you. Okay. Catch up with me after, and we'll go from there. The question was for the recording, if you're using an SBA, your Teams is down, you're failed over to the SBA, and you make a 911 call, is it still a conference call or is that not? So,
Yeah.
And as a host on the SBA. Given that, I will say the call is likely a call, it's hosted on the SBA because that media is directly going to that SBA from your Teams client. I don't know if it's a conference call or not. I don't know if it creates a bridge that other people can join, or if it's just a basic outbound Teams call. That's the scenario I'd need to validate for you. Awesome. And then this is the emergency calling policy. Now, one thing I also mentioned is a little bit another hidden feature of Teams. It's part of what this policy used to be and kind of how it's changed over the years. We have a option for an emergency dial string. So the emergency dial string, that's a number that if dialed, do this. So you could set this to be 901, 933. So 933, you get different notifications. But if you type the word default in all lowercase letters, the Teams admin center will actually gray that box out. And it doesn't matter any number you dial for 911, 933, it'll always follow that rule and that policy. So it's kind of a little hidden thing. If you had legacy policies from a couple years ago, you'll see default in there already. But if you're creating a new policy, you add that in there. It'll make it to where it applies to all emergency calls. So direct routing, if you define 15 numbers as emergency dial strings, it would apply automatically to all 15 of those. And this is talking about the different notification modes that we went through. So we have things that we need to tell our users. We have things we don't want to tell our users. To tell our users, address can be determined at the time they make a call, or they may be required to enter it based on if they're on-site or off-site. The address will show on their client. It will not be shared outside the client. That's a big one. A lot of stuff in the news recently. Teams is asking for my location. My IT guys can track me. No, they can't. So part of the client, there is some reporting in Teams, but there's nothing that's going to say this person is exactly at this address at this exact time. Mobile client will ask for permission to location, just like Windows. Windows has been going through some security changes. As of Windows 11 24H2, this is a big PSA. You can no longer disable Windows location services. Previously, Windows location services messed with, sometimes CLS data would override the LIS data. There's some weird little issues. Fix was disable Windows location service. Well, with Windows 11 24H2, Microsoft's been doing a lot of operating system level hardening to where every app has to ask for permissions for certain things. And without Windows location services, there's no access to underlying location data in Windows anymore. So, big thing to mention there. Things you do not tell your users, just use your cell phone. Not legal. You can, if you want to tell them, go for it. I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. Again, cell phone's not going to know what floor you're on. They're going to be able to see latitude, longitude. That's it. So if you can use Teams to make 911 call where it's learning your network location, do so. Also, big thing with calls via cell phone, unless you're using a third-party service, it will not generate notifications. So there are third-party services that if, some cell phones on college campuses dial 911, it could generate notifications, but that's not part of Teams. It'll also not conference in anyone that can immediately help. So security, on-campus police, other things of that scenario, and not provide detailed network information. So, went through a lot of stuff. Before we move on, questions? Nope.
On a cell phone. Point. Yeah.
No. Nope. That long.
That part of the.
Correct.
So that.
That is everywhere in the U.S. If you like a mobile carrier has to support Next Gen 911 today.
Support it.
Yep.
But they don't take.
Elevation is not part of that. It's geocode, latitude, longitude. Yep. Yeah. Even then, an example, we're in Denver. It's like, 5,800 feet above 5,000 foot or whatever above sea level. How am I going to know that 5,800 foot and 5,823 is floor 2 in a building? Even then, you're not going to have that granularity. Now, you could also say the same with Teams learning via Liz. If I'm connected to an AP that's on the floor above me, it's best effort, but at least you have configured it to be compliant if it does connect to that AP. So, okay, so importing data into Microsoft Teams. What do I need to gather per site? So, big thing here is a list of building civic addresses and sublocations. So, for each building, floor 1 north, floor 1 south, we talked about different square footage requirements depending on your location. Sometimes, again, every customer is different. I've seen warehouses, like how do we split a warehouse? How do we identify areas in a warehouse? State of Ohio, where I live, we have requirements to where any exterior door in your building must have a number on it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. If you can split your warehouse into sections like that, that's great because the exterior, you'll see the building, it's warehouse section 1, warehouse section 2, et cetera. We have to gather our BSSIDs. BSSIDs, you may have seen the term SSID before. BSSIDs, the best way to look at it is for every SSID you have, multiply it by how many radios are broadcasting that per AP. So if you got a newer AP where you got 2.4, 5.8, and 6 gigahertz radios, you have 3 SSIDs, 3 times 3, you have 9 BSSIDs for that one AP. There are some scenarios for different AP manufacturers and how they derive these BSSIDs where you can simplify the data entry in Teams. We'll look at that here in a bit. But rule of thumb is for every SSID, multiplied by how many radios are broadcasting. That's how many BSSIDs for that one AP need to be put into Teams. We also have the ability to look at switch port and switch chassis ID. So that requires link layer discovery protocol, LDP. And this is the only method that is protocol is required. Whereas BSSID and subnet is protocol agnostic. There's no learning your neighbors or anything else. LDP can and likely will fail sometimes. It's just nature of how things work. So if you don't have to use it, don't. Unfortunate thing is, unless you're building the network from ground up, you're going to have to use it. So best world scenario, everything's a separate, every location's its own subnet, but you're going to have to use LDP. So again, I say don't. It's not meaning that you can't. It's just, correct, yes. The other thing we have to look at is subnets. And I put this big one here that says overlapping subnets. Subnets can be added to one location in Teams. So that means if you've got layer 2 of one subnet across multiple buildings, college campuses are usually the big scenario that I see that, you cannot add subnets to one civic address. Okay. So you automatically have to go to switch port and switch chassis ID identification for those buildings.
What
Yes.
happens with
Problem that you run into is pretend I have building A, building B. Building A and building B have the exact same subnet across both buildings, and LDP fails. But the address is for building A. Now emergency address is going to the wrong spot. That's the scenario you run into, that you don't want to ever have this scenario where somebody's going to the wrong building. When they made that one call. It'd be better that no location is sent in the call screened by an ECRC rather than assuming and guessing what that location is. Now, I also say subnets. We want to exclude VDI, VPN, and any type of multi-building subnets, kind of that scenario there. A big reason why we do VDI is you can log in to a VDI in Ohio from Australia, and gonna be some issues there. Now, external IP ranges. What we care about, we do not want to know about any Zscaler IPs. So if you're routing you have a zero trust networking model, you're routing your information through Zscaler, Azure. There's all these different options out there. We do not want those IPs in Teams. Those are always dynamic. Those are already changing. We do not want that. If you have dynamic IPs for sites, that is bad, because Teams we'll look at next slide actually. Teams is an and match for certain scenarios. So if you look at a subnet must also match the public IP when it goes out to Microsoft. If it doesn't match the two, I can have the same subnets at home, so it has to match the two for it. So if you have dynamic IP, have fun with that. There are some ways that you can automate that, so you can have some type of probe that probes every 30 minutes at a site, and if the IP changes, have some type of scripting and other things that can update the database in Teams. It's not assigned to a site, thankfully, so it just dump the CS Trusted Network address inside of Teams. The other thing that I recommend for external IP ranges is always gather the entire block. You can put a /32 in there, no problem, it'll work. But a lot of times network teams, if they have, let's say, a /27, they have a pair of HA firewalls, they want to migrate to another one, they're going to set a different IP for that external address. Now you got to worry about it from Teams, whereas you can just add the whole block, you're good to go. And then we also need to gather who needs to receive those 911 notifications per site. Yes.
Taylor.
Yep.
We've asked them bypass.
Yep.
Should be going. That's the only.
That is the only solution.
Right. Because you're always, or you dedicate that.
I do need to add something on the bypass. You cannot just bypass IPs. You must bypass DNS and IPs through that solution. Okay.
Dynamic option.
Yep.
Zscaler. Security. Or one of our
Correct.
But that is really way.
Correct. Yeah. You can't route it through the services.
All traffic.
Correct. And I would argue if you don't trust traffic going to Teams, you don't trust you've got bigger problems. It's one of my favorite things is I get into customer environments like, oh yeah, you got to go into our VDI to get into Teams admin. So I'm like, why? Another question.
I'm seeing this calorie. With yeah. But
Got to answer this right there.
That's I'm hopeful that we start. Great lucky Goes for everything here.
Add me to that.
It's the same. You're talking. I said in my session. Now, maybe oh yeah, hold on, no. But yeah, you'll like
The other thing I'll mention, VPN, like Zscaler, bypass DNS and IP, IPs for Teams and other Microsoft services. Big thing there is DNS is the biggest one that a lot of people don't realize. They're like, oh yeah, we blocked, got rid of the 252 IPs. They're going out there local internet egress. Problem is your VPN adapter always takes precedence for DNS lookups. So that DNS lookup's going back to your on-prem DC or whatever else you have, and then it's going out to the internet, doing a DNS anycast request, getting something local to maybe let's say Chicago, but you're in Denver. It's so you always want to make sure you're optimizing that Teams traffic. That's not just 911, that's just Teams in general. We talked about how does Teams uses this data. Jamie, can I talk about the changes to that at all? Or okay, yeah, I'm gonna keep it as this is the path right now until I confirm it. So logic in Teams is that we have an AND match for everything. SSIDs, LTP switch ports, switch chassis IDs, and subnets must also match to an external IP, a trusted IP range inside of Teams. If it'll start first by BSSID. If it doesn't match there, it'll go to switch port. If it doesn't match there, it'll go to switch chassis. And if it doesn't go there, it'll go to subnet. If it doesn't match at the end of that to anything, it's going to go location cannot be determined. And then it'll fail over to your CLS or just location not detected inside of Teams. If any of those match, it's going to look against your trusted IP list inside of Teams. It's going to say then perfect. Location matched by the Liz database. Your location is then set in the Teams client. When you dial 911, you're going to be connected to the PSAP based off that geolocation. Inside of Teams, where do we configure this? Click on locations. We have 3 options. Mercy address, that's your Liz database. Network topology, that's a separate place for subnets, but that's for network-based policies. So that's where we handle dynamic Mercy calling policies, Mercy call routing policies based on the user sites, and those will always take precedence over what is assigned to a user. The bottom portion is network locations. That is also your Liz database. It's kind of a combination view of everything, kind of at a glance view. But again, the big thing here is network topology does not use the Liz database. So this is, again, another area in Teams. You got Mercy addresses, you get your subnet info. You got network topology subnet info. It's called quality dashboard subnet info. ECDN subnet info. Microsoft Places subnet info. Same data, multiple spots. None of it talks to each other. So for this data entry, I have a 911 workbook that I use for every single one of my customers. QR code, GitHub link. And I will show that here off just so you're able to kind of see a demo of what this looks like inside of Teams. So everybody got the link? Good to go? Cool. So going into workbook demo, got Microsoft Defender popping up for whatever reason. There we go. Go ahead and stop the presentation. This is the 911 workbook. Every customer I put into Teams goes through this notebook. The idea here is we're going to just go through each tab. I'm going to blow it up a little bit just so people can kind of see things on the back of the room. We'll talk about what this data means and why we have the data there. So first column A. This is civic address name. This is internal to you. This is never presented external to the organization, never presented to the user. This name I use for 3 different things in Teams. I use it for my emergency calling policy, network topology, and for the emergency address itself. Because of that, there is one area in Teams that I cannot use certain characters in, network topology. Doesn't allow for hyphens, doesn't allow for, there's like 4 characters it doesn't allow for. General rule of thumb that I've used with a lot of customers that's been very successful is that if you are naming a network device, a switch, a router, a lot of times you have a site code or something that uniquely identifies that building, that site inside of your network. I use that as a civic address name. So in this case, I'm just using something I use at my house: Ohio 1, Ohio 2, Virginia 1, Florida 1, whatever else you have. Again, it's internal to you. No one else sees it. It's just used here. Columns B and C stay blank, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The reason why is those are GUIDs that we track in Teams. So when we create this civic address in Teams, that data is going to come back into this. Column D is company name. This is presented to the PSAP when you dial 911. Rule of thumb, set your organization name here. However, let's say you have a location that's a shared building and your logo is not on the outside of that building. So let's say I'm going to use Algo as a name. So you got a company that your company's ABC company, but you have a building that has a big Algo logo on the outside of the building. Put your company name -Algo or something. So if you are someone that's not familiar with the area, you're a responder, you're driving up, hey, well, I'm looking for this building. Here's the address, but where I'm actually going, you'll see that Algo logo and know that that's the building. Next few columns: country, house number, pre-directional, post-directional, street name, suffix. Those are all pretty much standard. It's your address. Fields are used if applicable. ELIN tag, we don't really use that for most deployments anymore, so we just kind of leave it blank. And then latitude, longitude. So easy way to get this: Google Maps. Go find your address, right-click it, get your latitude, longitude. You're validating it right then and there, but that is exactly where I want that geocode to be. Next to that, we get a Marsi address site creation command. So that takes all of our fields, makes it into a PowerShell command. We run it in Teams. We get all of our data back. Now, we're not going to copy out of that PowerShell anything else. We're not going to worry about the GUIDs yet. We have a kind of a little special way for doing that, making this easy for you. Big thing here is that there is no address validation that happens when you type this in. So when you enter it via PowerShell, zero validation. So by you entering this address here, you are the one validating that these geocodes are correct. I have the required fields that I have in place. Okay. When you run it via PowerShell, I can put 123 Elf Street and it's going to say validated. So little fun, fun thing in Teams. So great. We have our Marsi address created, our civic address. To the right of this, there's 2 extra columns. And we mentioned that we use the same site name for our network topology and for our Marsi calling policy. Because the network topology is eventually going to reference the same policy, we want to create a Marsi calling policy first and then our network topology. Now, I'm going to put a big what if scenario here. If you are not doing a per building Marsi calling policy, let's say your college campus, you just want one global, you're calling it great. You do not need to create that Marsi calling policy. You have to edit the last column a little bit. But most companies, they have, it's distributed across the country or something. They want calling policies per site. That's the way this workbook is built. So just big word of caution, depending on that for you guys. Questions on civic address. Okay. Location. And also the big thing here also is that anything in yellow is given to you as an example. It's just, kind of, so when you're filling this out, you know exactly what data you're putting into the workbook. These places, yes. So that's your sublocations inside of Teams. We're going to come back to how we fill this out in bulk, getting the data in here. So in here, 2 things you need to worry about: civic address name. So that's the same name from the first page. And then column D is your sublocation. So this is where you now need to define and look at each of your buildings to say, okay, we could just do floor 1, floor 2, or suite 100 _ floor 1, floor 1 north, floor 1 south. It is up to you and how you are defining that. General rule of thumb is location name. I think it's like a 30-character limit for a lot of PSEPs, if I recall correct. I don't. 60 is the new one. Okay. Yep. So you can be descriptive here, but the thing I will caution you on is in the Teams client, it's only going to show so much. And so if somebody sees, just South Central building 1 or building floor 1, they're not going to necessarily see exactly what floor and to validate that location without dialing 993 as a test number. So my rule of thumb, keep it as short and sweet as possible. A lot of times when I build these, I do them as underscore. So suite 100 _ floor 1, just depends on how you're deploying that inside the environment. So general rule of thumb that I use for changing to Liz, an hour. That's the general rule of thumb. If you're not seeing any changes, just reboot your Teams client. So exit on the taskbar, reboot it. It kind of refreshes all the policies and everything that's a part of the client. It will, no problem. It kind of forces it to do that location lookup and get you going. So, yep. Yes. So we talked about filling this out, at least for these 2 pages. We'll get to the next tabs here in a minute. Well, how do we get these GUIDs back into this workbook? So if you go back to the GitHub page, I've got 2 commands here. This pulls all your Liz civic addresses and all your Liz locations. As long as you created these via this workbook, this method will work because the moment that you add them in Teams, they are stored in the order in which you add them into Teams. They're not stored alphabetically. That database is built linearly. So if I just simply export all my civic addresses from Teams, I'll get a little CSV. I copy the 2 columns. I go paste that to my first page. Second page, it's a little bit it's not so nice, but the moment I create those GUIDs, I put those here, gives me my command for my list locations. Again, I can run that second command. I just then copy paste and I have my entire column E filled out in this workbook. You're probably wondering, why do we care about filling this workbook out? Why do we care about building this massive list of GUIDs? The reason being is that it starts in the next tab. This is our BSSID tab. And I do got 5 minutes left, so I'm just trying to be cognizant of your guys' time. This list is designed so that you fill out your business IDs. Description, I typically recommend doing the AP name if you have an internal name or MAC address or something that identifies that AP. Column C is what I have my customers fill out. This is civic address name underscore sublocation. So when you go out and fill this out, you're going to use a similar format. So in this case, OH1 underscore floor 1. What I do is then I go through this list and I then do based on that location tab, I find the civic address, this location. I then pop in that GUID into column D. So this is part of what I do as a consultant for my customer. I don't expect them to be going back, copying, pasting, dealing with this tab. Especially when we have 18,000 plus entries in this workbook, it does take a little bit. Benefit here is that once you have the location ID of where that BSS ID for that AP is located, it then gives you a PowerShell command you can easily copy, paste, run it. What I will recommend is if you're doing a couple hundred import, PowerShell is perfectly fine. If you're doing more than that, do the CSV upload inside Attack. It'll go a lot quicker instead of waiting for each PowerShell command to sit there and execute. There is a limit that I'm not a fan of 3 megabytes for the CSV size in Attack. So you will have to separate that. I think it's like 4,100 lines I'm able to get per CSV max. So if you have that, you have to separate it out. So that I could probably easily script together. Haven't done so yet. Haven't had time. So LTP ports, very similar. Switch chassis ID. This is going to be different based on each switch manufacturer. Cisco switches, if you run show version, it's a base Ethernet MAC address per each switch. So if you have 4 switches in a stack, there's going to be 4 entries inside that. Port ID is based off of how that switch manufacturer identifies the port. Cisco is kind of like a G10/1, T10/1, depends on your switch manufacturer. C, I use as the switch name. And then D, again, is that civic address underscore location name. If there is no sublocation, so there's a scenario where you may not have a sublocation. You have a building, 1 floor, smaller than 60,000 square foot. You can just put that in there as a civic address location ID rather than a sublocation ID. I've not. You have to pretty much SSH. Yeah. No. So Cisco Catalyst is all CLI, so you'd have to SSH in every switch.
How come you do?
Yeah, Meraki's easy. You just dump here's all the chassis IDs. Even BSS IDs, their API is beautiful. Yep. Another question. Mm-hmm.
By the way.
Yep.
With
column E. Yeah, it's the column E. So that's, I think you stepped out of the room for a minute. So that's this location tab. So this becomes our kind of master database of all of our GUIDs. So we have our civic address ID. That's not really used for assignment. That's used for creating the actual LIS location, the sublocation. But the civic address location ID and the location ID are the ones that are being used for reference there. So when you're out of the room, we've talked about how in column, like in BSS IDs as an example, location name is, we have the customer fill out civic address underscore sublocation or just civic address. And then what I do is I go through and I fill out this based off that database on the previous page. So now I've got the list of all the commands and it has the right GUIDs for that. Being cognizant of time, LTP switches, similar thing. It's switch ports, just difference. There's no port. It's just the switch itself. This one I use a lot with customers. They have one subnet for an entire building. They have IDFs, thankfully, for each floor. So all the switches for that floor, just dump it right in here. You're good to go. Yes, and so that's off the GitHub page that I have. So there's after you create your civic address, you fill out that second page. You then run this. It'll fill out all your location GUIDs, keeps them all in order. Yes. Subnets. This is a different page. Subnet. Those aren't networking guys. Every network has an identifier, has a range of usable addresses, and a broadcast IP. In a scenario of a /24, .0 is your network identifier. 1 through .254 is your usable host addresses. .255 is your broadcast. We want to know that host address, so that .0. So in this case, 10210/24, that's our prefix length in column B. Description is whatever you would like. Wireless, voice, users, whatever you have for your VLANs or other areas. Now I mentioned right here, location name OH1 or OH1 floor 1. So this is a scenario where one subnet we're assigning to the building, two subnets we're assigning to a sublocation. In this scenario, we've got a wireless subnet that spans one building, but it's the entire building. So if you roam around that entire building, you would be part of that subnet. So we want to assign it to the actual civic address location ID versus anything less. Below that, we have our two floors. So these are, this is on floor 1, voice and user subnet. It doesn't expand beyond those 2 floors. We don't want to change that. The reason why I add that wireless one in here is unlike that scenario we talked about earlier where it's one subnet across multiple buildings, where it's one building. The SSIDs, people maintaining the database, doesn't always happen. A lot of times network guys will change out an AP, don't care about what happens next. Something is better than nothing in that scenario. So that's why we add that here. Nice thing here is to the right, after we fill that out, we get our GUIDs. We have our emergency address subnet add command. But because we've already created that network topology site, we also have our network topology command right here as well. So now we can automatically separate the two. So we have both import commands for Teams. So network topology takes the CIDR. Emergency address does not. So I still ask you to gather that data. So if you actually look, you'll see there's a mass bits over here. You won't see that over here.
Here she got to clarify for you that they have
You correct. I haven't added that logic in yet, but that is something that I can. I've been thinking about doing a YouTube video on this, so it's like a quick reference for customers because it's like the SBC cert renewals. I always get customers, how do I renew certs on SBCs? Now it's down to 200 days and it's going to be 40, what is like 48 or whatever here in a couple of years. Joys. I know we're almost out of time, so I'm just actually over time. Trusted IPs, very simple. Subnet prefix length gives you the import command and the notifications. This is just more like data gathering. There's no automation here. I let you as the consultant determine how to gather that. But it gives you the general feel. We have global. Global is always populated because that's your users off-site or location not found. And then you have typically each building, or in the event you're just using global. It just depends on your options. Finishing up here. I'll just do from current slide. I'll go full screen here. Maybe. There we go. We got it. Okay. Finishing up here real quick. Again, maintain the Liz database. You must work with the networking team. This is not just a one-time import and call it a day. You have to continuously make sure that this is maintained. Easier said than done. So new APs, subnets, ISP changes, anything else, your network team needs to be aware of that and always make sure that they're keeping you guys informed. Unfortunately, I don't have any automation that can help you out there. There's some stuff I've been working. I will tell everybody in the room, I've been working on some automations with Meraki and maintaining the Liz database automatically. So if you're familiar with the Meraki dashboard, there's a notes field. And so I'm storing location IDs for different APs or other devices in there. So I have a script that goes through and syncs that, makes Meraki authoritative over Teams. So there's some fun stuff coming out here soon. But again, remember your naming convention, helpful in the future. And then final wrap up, want to thank a bunch of people that have helped me, kind of get to the point in my career where I'm at today. And also want to thank our 2026 Platinum sponsors again, followed up with questions. Anything else? Awesome. Thanks, guys. Please complete your evaluations and thank you.